James Mathers from the Digital Cinema Society. We're here at first annual DCS Cine Lens Day, and we're going to talk about micro and macro photography. We have cinematographer and camera operator, Steadicam operator, DIT, my good friend Enrique Del Rio, very involved in DCS, and we thank him for that. We also have Ed Stamm from Infinity Photo-Optical, and Sean Ruggeri from Laowa. Take it away, guys.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So we have two guests that have a line of products that is that offer a very nice array of opportunities and tools for the job. Each one of their kits is similar but very different. And I would like to invite them to make a quick presentation of what they brought us, and then we'll get us some questions. So Ed, if you'd like to take it away.
So I'm Ed Stamm, Infinity Photo-Optical. We build microscopic lenses for the still in motion digital industry. So our system, as you'll see in this kit up front of me, we have the ability to do micro focus to 16x, so 16 times. You can take the little fruit flies. We have a picture in our booth, and we can blow it up to look like a good Godzilla character. So they do some very unique things. And then we have a macro lens called the Macro Pro, which will go up to 4x. Now, the system has other lenses in it, but in the micro world, the macro world, these are very powerful lenses because the range you can get is extreme. I don't think very many companies that have a 16x micro view. The lens system comes with a focuser. And if you think in terms of the biology classes you may have had in high school or college, we're actually using microscopic objectives, and we're putting them on the focuser. And the focuser is then allowing us to get that image onto a sensor. So if you're a still photographer, you can cover a full 3:2 frame perspective. If you're a digital cinematographer, you get full frame, Super 35. And the mount is neutral. It's called a T2 mount. Makes it kind of unique because you can buy the kit, and then you can buy mounts for any of your cameras. So you can buy a PL mount for a digital motion camera. You can buy a Sony mount. You can buy a Canon mount. So you would have one lens system that covers a multitude of cameras. What I'll do real quick if I can, and then I'll turn over to you. So this is the focuser. So to this you attach 5 different lens elements. 2 of them are the macro, micro world. On the focuser, the ring here is how you would focus the lens, and there's an iris on here so you can control your field of view and sharpness, contrast, I should say. So this is the system, and on the back it's a neutral mount. You just screw on a lens mount. So in this case, you could use the PL mount. It just screws right on. So the lenses are kind of small because they're microscope objectives, but this is the lens that'll go to 16x. So if you get a chance, come by our booth. It's right behind where we're sitting now, and I'll show you some images, and you can actually see it performing.
All right, thank you. So Sean has, with Laowa, they also have different mounts, right?
Correct, yeah. All of our lens lines are very versatile when it comes to swapping mounts, user swappable. And what I have in front of me right now is our newest version of our probes, Pro 2B, or most people just call it the Probe 2. Currently, with a PL mount, you can user swap that out to EF, to Z, to L, whatever you'd like to. It's a real simple swap out. The differences in the newer version here is this is a T8. So initially our earlier probes were T14s. So it's much faster. Being a T8, still needs some light, but it's much faster considering the last versions were T14. So it is a 2 times macro lens at 24 millimeters in focal length. It's a complete redesign though than the initial offerings from our probes. So total different optics, sharper, better color replications than the previous probes. And what I have in my hand, this one is the periscoping. So as you see, the shaft is angled down with the lens going straight forward to get you direct view of something on the ground, if you like, depending on your orientation of camera. Versus before, we had a periscoping lens and then we had a direct view. So there's 3 of these, this being the periscoping body of the lens. There's also a direct view straight angled lens out, and then another one with a straight angled body, and the lens itself is oriented at 35 degrees. That one's become really popular for up shots at things, down shots over things. With that being mentioned, this blue ring here has a little set screw. If you loosen that, you can orientate this in any direction you really want to. The first generation of the probes really put us on the map, I think, in the cinema world and the television world. A lot of commercial work, a lot of tabletop work done with them. So it was kind of our foot in the door, I think, when it comes to the cinema world. And so this is a vast improvement off of what we've done there. We also have an adapter for these to go on underwater housings. The underwater housing company I work with, Gates Underwater Products, we developed an adapter for the original ones, and now we have an adapter for the underwater housings for the straight direct view and then the 35-degree view too. So you saw shots of it. If you saw Blue Planet 2, you will see shots with it in future shows that I shouldn't name, but very similar to that. So it gives a really interesting perspective being able to take something like this, entering into a coral head, right into an anemone, getting right up close to a clownfish. Speaking of getting close focus on this is literally touching the front element of glass, basically. So you can get a very, very close view. And I think in the nature world, what we were used to was very long focal lengths for macro, where the 24 mil field of view lets you see the world still. You're that close to your subject, but you're still seeing what's around it. You're still getting a more immersive experience when looking at a close object still.
And that's one of the reasons why I said you guys had similar but very different products, because of the specialization. The beauty about nowadays what we have is that we live in this new world where things are being more accessible to people. And having these 2 examples, guys can tell us your basic kit, how much it goes for, and like for instance, if it covers full frame.
Yes, we cover full frame. And we have several accessories that I didn't get into that match up with the Laowa system. So we have a 45 and a 90-degree prism in this kit. We have an extender, so you can use it like a probe. And we have 3 other lenses that act as a special effects lens. And you're able to have a 100-millimeter lens that'll focus to infinity and hold deep focus all the way back to 20 inches. You have an SFX2, which is a 50-millimeter lens, focus to infinity, hold focus all the way back to 6 inches. Everything's in focus. And then we have a SFX3, which is a 35-millimeter lens, infinity to 2 inches. So to show the whole kit, you almost have to come over to our booth, because then you can see how all the pieces apply. But they work similar and then different, because it's a microscope tech as opposed to a probe spherical system.
Yeah, I didn't mention, but our probe is full frame coverage as well.
So, you guys touched about the mounts, that all your systems are very versatile that way. I'm just a curiosity, with these periscope type lenses, when you change the angle, it corrects, so you always end up horizontal on the sensor, right?
It would be like turning your camera, basically. So depending on the effect you're going for in the commercial work you're doing.
Oh, okay.
So yeah.
So like always do tests and
sure.
know
Absolutely.
what you're
Absolutely. It definitely lends itself to creating different versatile situations that you might not if you just had something that doesn't articulate like that. You may not have that intention to start with, but it really opens up creative doors when you can start kind of spinning the lens around objects, especially when you involve it with a motion control rig. It really helps create.
Okay. Now, with macro photography, what happens with back focus? Is that something that we care for? Or because you have such a shallow depth of field, you have the greater depth of focus? Therefore, the chances of having back focus issues are gone.
Well, in my experience in the macro and micro world, you are going to deal with a very narrow field of focus. It's just the way the macro lens system works. So that is what will happen. You'll find a range that you want to be in the macro range, and it'll be just at that distance. You can't make it any different. It doesn't magnify without having the right distance away. With the SFX lenses, those are not macro, but you could place your focus anywhere you want. So that's a difference. If you come out of the macro world with our macro and micro lenses, you can use them as regular lenses. And there you can then create your own depth of focus if you want. So they're versatile in that way.
Now, just as something that that I've been exposed to with different macro lenses is that they tell you it's 2 by, 3 by, etc. Now, my first question is, does 3 by is half of what 4 by offer, just like in T-stops in photography? Meaning you get double the magnification from 3 to 4, or it will be from 3 to 6?
I used to talk about macros this way, and I'm not sure it's as scientific of an answer that you may want, but I used to say to customers that use macro lenses, a 1x macro, if you had a postage stamp and it filled the entire sensor, that would be 1x. If you then went to 2x, you would have half of that stamp filling the full sensor. So 3x, 4x.
No, 3x is a quarter,
I would think so.
or so it's like photography, like T-stops.
That was the way I was taught to discuss macro lenses and how you could utilize their field of view. It's not as scientific as the lens designer. We could ask the man who built it.
Right. Well, we'll ask Jay.
Ask Jay later when you come by the booth.
What would be the benefit to use macro primes versus these kind of probes, for instance, that are even though they're fixed focal lengths, like, well, the Laowa is your system is not. You can change the front elements.
Right, you change
and
it.
you have the system that has also the
There's a separate system that we built that are strictly primes. They're called the Micromax. And so there's a range of 5 prime lenses that go from 125 telephoto down to a 40. And in those lenses, there's, besides focusing to infinity to capture a deep, deep focus, you also then have macro focus beyond the depth, deep focus. So I think it's the 90 goes to 6x, the 75 or 70 SA goes to 5.5x. So you have a variety of different macros that you can also apply out of one lens.
Yeah, and I believe probes are a very specific tool. You can use them in a lot of versatile situations, but you're still going to go back to something like a traditional prime lens for a lot of situations. Our probes are 24 mil, but we have all kinds of macro lenses, both on our still lens catalog. Something new that we've released recently, we call them swords. They are a line that goes all the way from 15 mil up to 180, and there's a 6 lens set. They're slightly different T-stops, the slowest being the longest, which is a T46, but the majority of them are T29, so they're pretty fast. The close focus on these things are insane, though. On the 15 mil, the widest, the usable close focus is touching the front element of the glass, basically, and if you can light that, it could be in focus. Having cinema gearing on something, the same thing with the probes. The gearing is very important when it comes to people working in the way that they're used to, especially with motion control rigs. You've got to be able to run the motors that you're used to running, and you've got to be able to use the equipment as you have with other cinema lenses. So you'll find the same kind of pitch in the gearing and the same type of construction you are used to with cinema glass.
What would be the difference, or what is the difference? We hear that there's macro photography and micro photography. What's the difference? Is there a threshold with the magnification, or what determines that?
So the scientists refer to 1x, 2x, 3x, 4x as macro. Anything beyond 4x becomes micro. And so we have a lens that goes from 1 all the way up to 16x in one lens. And so with that lens, you could literally focus at 16x at 3/4 of an inch in front of the front element. So again, like he said, if you can light it, you can focus it, and you can see it. And so, like I said, I have a picture of a fruit fly in the booth. It looks like Godzilla, and you'd have to understand that that's at 16x. So you're you're right on the head of that fruit fly. Because how big is a fruit fly? It's that little annoying black dot that you sometimes see in your kitchen, right? Yeah, so that's what we have.
Oh, I was just going to say, just to add on to the micro roll conversation, something I don't have here with me today, but we've shown it at a couple of the other shows, is we have a line called the Aragons, and that's 10x to 50x. So, I mean, you can get incredibly close to subjects. Not ideal situation on a table in a room full of moving people. As soon as that object moves the tiniest bit, I mean, you're out of focus. So it's a very controlled environment you'd use it in, but I mean, the scientific applications and the creative applications you can use it for, it's pretty incredible.
I was just going to say that the company's been in existence for 40 years, and they've built their reputation around scientific lensing first. And so in conjunction with what he's speaking of, we have something called the Ultima. On our website, you'll see that it does basically the same thing. It's a focuser with a variety of objectives you can put on the front, and you can get very extreme macro photography. And it's all mounted to the camera. You just change the front objective on it, so it's very easy to use. But we didn't bring that with us either, but you can find it on our website.
I know the Laowas do. I don't believe your system has T-stop smart per se,
No.
right?
No.
In the case, knowing that there's a lot of cinematographers with us today, is there a happy place for a T-stop, or the more the better?
Well, I mean, I think if we ask anybody in this crowd, they're going to say the wider, the better. For if you can get there, but are you always going to use it? I mean, I think when it comes to the lens construction and the design of it itself, there's going to be certain limitations to a certain point. So for us to go from T14 to T8 was a giant jump. Will we go beyond that? I think we'll see. But yeah, in the cinema world, I think everybody always wants faster. And I mean, plenty of cinematographers that shoot everything wide open on the fastest lenses they can get all the time. But is that the proper application for everything? Probably not.
And you guys have a very interesting system in terms of getting to that level.
We're in a different world because we're using microscope objectives. So that kind of changes the balance of how they set up and deal with light. So a microscope objective will capture actually a density of image, captures it, and in our system, it then throws it back like a movie projector to your sensor. So that path will start to eat up light, just because that's what happens if you had a movie projector and you swung it to 10 feet and then you swung it to 20 feet, it's going to lose half of its light. So in this world, we're kind of doing the same thing, but that's not a detriment at all, because in the world of the microscopic lens, there's a spot that is proper contrast and resolution. And you can see it on a waveform monitor. So you set the lens, we put a white dot on the lens to give you the range, but it isn't necessarily the exact spot. And you put it to that range, and you'll see the contrast jump suddenly. And when you're at that point, it is crisp and clear. So we don't put a number on it because it might be different for one of these lenses than the other, and they're all on one focuser. So you find that spot where it's the sweet spot. It's easy to do. It sounds maybe more complicated than it really is. But I'm sure everyone in here is used to looking at waveform monitors. You'll actually see that contrast jump in the waveform monitor, just like that. So that's how our system works. A little different.
Very good. Anybody has any questions that want to take this moment?
The question being about the probes having a fixed focal length. Yeah, I mean, it's the construction of the lens itself. I don't believe that lens would be as small as fast if there was some kind of zoom version of it. I couldn't really speak to it because I'm not the designer. But yeah, the 24 mil focal length is the happy spot that they have found for that probe. And to me, again, I think it's a really unique look because I'm so used to so much macro being a really long focal length. So for us to actually be able to see the world behind that tiny subject, I think it's a really pleasing focal length, and it's not extremely wide, which I kind of dig the extremely wide too. Like that 15 mil in the sword line is a really unique look because it's so wide, but you can get right up on a subject. So it's got some really, really interesting applications as well.
Well, Thank you, guys.
Thank you.